project tree is the place that you navigate your project. It's also how you see the difference between your offline project and your online project. Now, right now we are in an online state, so I'm connected to my PLC, and it's pretty evident straight away that there's an issue. This issue is not so much an issue, it's more of a difference in a lower level component. And if I open this, I can see that this object here is different. And also in this folder here, we also have a difference on these two objects. So straight away, within a few seconds, I've been able to navigate through my project, see the key difference objects or the things that have differences. And although it doesn't tell me straight away what the difference is, this little icon does tell me that online and offline are different. That means that it exists in both my project and in my PLC, but they are different. And if we come down here, we can see that these items here exist only in the PLC. So if I hover over that, exists only online. Now, there are reasons why these don't exist in my project and only in the PLC, and that's because they're not needed in my project right now. But you can clearly see that it's only in the online project, which is always orange, and doesn't exist in my project, which is always blue. And I don't have any, but if I did have an object that didn't exist in the PLC, we'd see just a blue ball here. So the project tree usually is collapsed. So when you first open to your portal, you will have this sort of view, and you might have more than one PLC, you might have some drives, you could have HMIs, you could have lots of different things, and you might not be online to all of them at the same time. And we'll cover going online and offline in another lesson, but there is no real difference apart from the statuses here in how things are displayed when you are online or offline. It's just you get some indication here as to whether or not things are okay, as in healthy, or differences in projects or incompatibilities and things like that. If I have a look at my program blocks, you'll see that here, these top three here are considered loose. So they are in the program blocks, but aren't in a folder. Some people don't organize anything and everything's just chucked in this program blocks here. Personally, I like to right click, go to add new group, and then group things accordingly. Now, this is an example project, so things are grouped by their examples. For example, if I open this one, you can see the simple start stop control. These are all the different language examples that we have for the simple start stop control scenario. But you could organize things by function, by language, even just by type of object, so function block or data block. There's lots of different ways, and I encourage you to experiment with the way that works best for you. But one thing that is worth noting is when you're online and you right click, you can do your snapshot of values, loading snapshots, loading start values, and copying snapshots to start values, which will make more sense as we go through the course. But if you don't think about how you group things now, you may run into issues when you want to do snapshotting and restoring of data later if you want to do it at a group level. So it is important how you group your project, and your project is managed around grouping and organization of your blocks directly in the project tree. Something that is not given a lot of focus in the project tree are all the sort of things outside of programming. It's very easy to start a project and jump straight into the program blocks and hardware setup and things like that. But there's quite a lot outside of your PLC in the project tree, which is also worth considering. So let's minimize the PLC for now. So the first thing is this is where you add new devices. It's also where you set up your devices and networks for connecting devices together. You have ungrouped devices here. Now, things get added into here when you sort of import them or create them and they don't have a space. They fall in here. So you might find things like VSD drives in this space. You have security settings for users and roles. And this can be important if you're using multi-user projects or if you have HMIs in your projects that you want to sync together for users. We have cross-device functions for safety testing, project-wide traces. This is where you might be looking at more than one PLC and having a look at data from individual PLCs and plotting them on a trace. And again, we will cover traces later on in the course. We have common data. This is stuff that is common amongst things like HMIs for alarm classes, logs for things that things that have happened throughout the project. Instruction profiles. This tells you what you can and can't use in certain PLCs that are within this project. Documentation and settings, so you can build documentation that can be printed directly from TIA Portal, and that sits at a project level, not a device level. Language and resources, which are predominantly for translation across your devices. And then here we have our version control interface, which we will cover later on in the course, but this is where we can export things such as objects in a PLC at a textual level and then run them through something like Git for version control and difference detection. I understand completely what Siemens are doing with this. I will say right now that it's not as good as it could be, but we will touch on it later on. You also have access to online. Now, what this does is allow us to search for devices that we haven't got configured in our project yet. And we will, again, go through this in more detail, and I'll give you an example. But for example, we could open this, say, update accessible devices, and when it scans the network using a layer 2 protocol, if anything answers, it's then available for us to upload into the project. There are some limitations around that though. And also here we have our card reader or USB memory device that we can access and take things from the card reader or put to the card reader depending on what we're trying to do. So that's things like traces, configuration data, things like that. And because these tools aren't used very often, they're quite easy to miss that they sit in the project tree. And it's quite easy, especially if you're just using a single device, such as one PLC in your project, it's quite easy to overlook the fact that this project tree is a lot more than just navigating your PLC. And when everything is used together, it is very, very powerful, the options that TIA Portal has in this project tree.